Well, this is Dr. Stan back here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay, and bringing you the news behind the news, the story behind the story. Hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at, that illusion is usually king. But in the battle for survival of Western civilization, it's going to be reality, not illusion or delusion, that'll determine what the future will bring. And I need to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views. And, well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of Bob Chapman, the international forecaster, as we talk about the demise of the dollar. I talked to Lindsey Williams today, and I just said, what did they tell you about this coming conflict in the Middle East? And, well, he said suddenly that they had told him this conflict was coming. It was about 4 months ago. And suddenly there is a conflict over there. The whole structure of the Middle East is collapsing. But he always also reiterated what Ken Fromm had told me. Ken was one of the insiders. Now, we always wonder, were they feeding Lindsay faulty information? I don't think so. I think Ken was dying. He had nothing to lose. And basically he said that by the end of 2012, the dollar would be dead. He said that their currency is gold and silver. He said that they were going to get the price of oil up to $150 to $200 a barrel, and said that this has been reiterated recently to Lindsay from other people in the oil industry. We're talking about $200 a barrel for oil. Do you know what that'll do to our economy? And why would they do that? Because they want, of course, to make a lot of money. They want to wreck our economy. They want to impoverish our people. They want to enslave the United States. The only nation in the world which could stop this move towards the New World Order and the New World Religion and the establishment of the New World Spiritual Leader, who will be the Antichrist. This is not imaginary. These things are taking place. Silver was up over $1 and something 25 cents today. It's gone up over $4 an ounce in the past week. $4 an ounce in the last week. Gold was up strongly again today. It was closed at $14,002, $14,003. It's up certainly over $50. $50 in this last week. Gold and silver are the canary in the mine shaft, and the canaries dropped over dead. And you better, ladies and gentlemen, move if you're going to move, and move in a hurry. Now, certainly even the New York Times will tell you that there's going to be marked inflation by the end of this year. Articles of the Wall Street Journal talk about, well, there's really no serious inflation. If you take fuel and food out of the equation, why, look at the things like the fee for going to a race there at the Daytona 500. So the prices of getting into Daytona are down. And they write this article about inflation in America, and they mention over and over that the price of admission to the Daytona races has fallen from $95 to $65, that haircuts have not gone up, and all you have to do is just look and see what's going on, and if you exclude fuel and food and anything else with the prices going up, why, there's nothing to worry about. There is no inflation. Ladies and gentlemen, our leaders are not that stupid. Are you going to believe what they tell you? Or are you going to believe your lying eyes? Bob, they tell us there's no inflation if you simply exclude fuel and food and manufactured items. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's rather deceiving.
That is a gross understatement, but then you've always been a master of the understatement. Go right ahead.
Well, I got it clocked here about 7%. John Williams, who you all know, eminent economist, has it at 9.25, and the other.
Well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest, Bob Chapman of the International Forecaster. We're just saying that the government tells you that there is no inflation, Sydney, and that's why they're going to continue pumping massive amounts of money into our economy by buying up bonds to keep the interest rates down. The only trouble is the more money they put in to keep the interest rates down, the higher the interest rates goes, the more it costs to borrow money, the more pressure it puts on the economy. Today, the Federal Reserve says you've got nothing to worry about. They've just released their January minutes from their meeting. And yet, of course, if you look and see what's happening, even reading the front pages of the New York Times, they will tell you there is inflation, and by the end of the year it's going to be rampant. And they say, well, we'll wait until it happens and we'll act. By then it is too late. I mean, if you wait until the prices skyrocket, why, of course, you can't bring them down, unless, of course, you raise the interest rate to 20% and then you destroy the economy. That's what Paul Volcker did in 1980. It seems to me that they're in an impossible situation, but these are not stupid men. Obviously, they are trying to wreck our economy, impoverish our people, just exactly as Richard Haas wrote about in the November-December issue of Foreign Affairs magazine, where he said we're going to have austerity and much lower living standards, much lower living standards, much lower living standards, much more lower living standards. He kept repeating that until finally even I got the idea, hey, I think we're going to get much lower living standards, as they move now to consolidate their power over the poor and impoverished and begging American people, begging the government simply to do something to help them. They're losing their homes, and they're losing their jobs, and they're losing their families, and they're losing hope. And that's what happens when you take people into an inflationary spiral, and it's happening intentionally. Ben Bernanke knows what he's doing, but it is owned by the bankers who control the privately owned Federal Reserve System. Bob Chapman, you pick up the story.
Well, all of what you say is true. It goes for the unemployment figures, which have get pegged at 22.6%. And they're not going to improve. You're going to have layoffs in municipalities and states. They can't get around it. So they can't produce 250,000 jobs a month to take care of the growing work population each month, never mind the people who are getting laid off. So it's not going to improve much or any. And so I certainly am not inspired with what they're doing. See, in QE1 and the stimulus, they addressed the banks, which are bankrupt. And they're still bankrupt. But they sort of took them out of the woods with our guarantees and our money. Secondly, we got QE2, the bailing out the government and the agencies, which are Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, and FHA. Don't know, nor do they care one bit about the American public. And they want them to lose their homes. 1.2 to 1.5 million people are going to lose their homes this year. They don't care. They want them destitute because then they're pliable. Then they can be told, look, if you go along with one world government, that's not the way they'll put it, but if you go along with one world government, we'll feed you, we'll get you a job, and all that sort of thing. And this is where they're headed for. And there's no stopping it. And they go right to the end with it because they have to. They cannot not take it all away. Because when we get there, if they lose, they're all getting hung. And they know it. And so this is a fight to the finish, truly, between good and evil. And these people are evil.
You're absolutely right. Suddenly, I've never seen anything in all the years I've been following silver like I've seen this last week. Silver.
Did you see today?
Well, yeah, I saw it today. Why don't you tell our listeners what's happened this last week?
No, let me explain what happened today. We were over in Asia, gold went up. In London, it went up. At 4:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, it was trading at up 14.50, and $1.17 on silver. And then once London second finishes, which is around 11:30 New York time, it trades in the access market, which is very thin. But the United States government has used the access market over and over and over and over to fix the prices. So what happened is the, quote, good guys went in today and said, well, we'll play that in two. And gold finished at 14.07, up 18.40. And silver, are you sitting down?
Yes.
Was up 157 to 33.87.
Well, I can remember when you could buy an ounce of silver for $1, what was it, 29, something like that.
It was 29 cents.
Yeah.
$1.29, right.
Right, and it was up how much today?
157.
$1.57.
And I predicted that these kind of days were going to happen, and the same thing is going to happen with gold. And I was just telling Judy tonight, I said, I can't wait for it to swing $100 a day. And then everybody will start to get the message. For the last 2.5 years, gold has been going up because it was a flight to quality. What is the real currency of the world? Is it the dollar or is it gold? Gold is one hands down. The next phase, phase 2, will be gold going up because of inflation. And if they go to QE3, it's hyperinflation. So that's where this whole thing is headed. And there's no stopping it. And the economy is going to continue to deteriorate. GDP will be up, including all this QE2 and the injection of $862 billion in that pork package called a tax bill that went through. And they'll be lucky if they can do 2 to 2.25% GDP growth. The second half of the year is going to be dreadful because the benefits of the injection of $862 billion, most of it's going to hit in the first 3 to 4 months of the year.
Well,
unbeknownst to most,
the
Federal Reserve has been buying Treasury paper last June. Now, they haven't spent $600 billion, and they're not going to spend $600 billion by June. They've already spent it. They're lying. Simple. And they will spend $1.7 trillion before September the 30th, the end of the fiscal year. And they're going to have a QE3. And they'll do the same thing. And they won't get the 3% of last year, the 2.25% or 2% they're going to get this year. They get 1%, which in real terms is a -1.5, maybe a -2. So that's where we're headed with the economy. It's not going to get any better, and that is for sure.
All right. Well, of course, I guess it's Bob Chapman. Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. And I don't know how long we've had Bob on as a regular guest here, probably 4 or 5 years. But he's always stressed the importance of buying gold and silver. Silver in the aftermarket was up $1.50 or more today. Within one day, we're talking about the most massive increase in the price of silver I've ever seen. For those of you who got into silver, Bob's suggestion, and some people say you ought to be predominantly in silver, and some people say you ought to be predominantly in gold, and Bob says, yes, you ought to be half in one and half in the other, because we don't know what's happening, but silver is certainly outperforming gold at the present time, and people have to make preparations for the difficult times that are coming down the line. Now, basically, certainly gold is a means of storing wealth, but since it's been kept down artificially for many years, there's probably an opportunity to make a great deal of profit in your gold investments. But the important thing to do is to preserve what you have. And if you are invested in the traditional investments like bonds and stocks, as the dollar is destroyed, and certainly Mr. Fromm, who is actually the president of ARCO when he he retired, and he just recently died. You can look him up on the internet, and certainly I've known who he was for many years. But he told Lindsay, by the end of 2012, the dollar would be dead. He also said, we use our currency, and Lindsay said, what do you mean? He said, we use gold and silver. And of course, he's talking about the people in the oil business. He also said, and I really think this is probably true, the price of oil is going up to $200 a barrel. Imagine what that will do if it happens to the American economy. Let's go to John, who's calling from Michigan, or he'll be available in just a moment or two. But certainly it looks like the price of oil is going up. Whether it'll get to that price, we just have to wait and see. But if it did, what would a $200 a barrel oil do to American economy?
It would cost $150 billion in additional cost to the American consumer, and that would come out of the consumption of the goods and services. So instead of the GDP growth from consumers being 75, it probably dropped down to about 66. The long-term mean is 64 year after year after year. So that's where we're going. And that's just at 120. If it goes to 200, forget it. You're going to shut the world down.
And ladies and gentlemen, why would anybody want to do that? Because there's tremendous profits to be made. But it's more than that, ladies and gentlemen. It was just profits, you know. They can make profits any way they want to. These are smart people. They have an agenda. They want to destroy existing society and replace it with a new one. Once you understand that and the spiritual implications, it all makes sense. Our number 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 464-8295. Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 464-8295, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. And a caller had called in. He says his a friend who has about $300,000. Where should they move to preserve the value of their currency? So if somebody had $300,000 today, but then of course really it depends upon your age, it depends upon where you live, but just in general, somebody said, where should they move to preserve the equity? Should they go to Guatemala? That was the question. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you, Guatemala is one of the most primitive countries in Latin America. It is not a bad place to live, islands, but it adjoins Mexico, and the people are forever coming over the border into Mexico, and of course the Mexicans are enveloping them and sending them home. But I've been there, and it wouldn't be one of my choices unless you like to live out in the middle of nowhere with nothing to do. With that said, in investment, first of all, if you're going to Guatemala, what you have to consider is, will they allow you to bring your coins in or your bullion in if you want to? And the answer, you're going to have to find out from the embassy or the consulate. That's very important. And if you can't do that, you have to find out if you could buy there. Secondly, you don't send large amounts of money into a third world country. You want to make darn sure you know the ropes. And if you're going to buy anything, do not under any circumstances buy anything at least for 2 years that you're there. So in other words, when you go there, you rent. And that goes for any country. Germany, Japan, Mexico, anywhere. And I lived all over the place, I know. If you were going to invest and keep the money in the United States, or keep it in another place, and there aren't many other places left because Panama just healed to the American government, and the rules that they had before are no longer in place. It is not a haven anymore. And it's going to hurt them very badly. A lot of people will be leaving there. So what do you do with your money? I recommend 30% in gold and silver coins. For the most part, in silver, 90% silver bags, which are pre-1964 dimes, quarters, and halves. I like that the best. That's what I've been buying. As far as gold coins are concerned, bullion coins in different denominations, and that would be 1 ounce. These are approximate now. Half ounce, quarter ounce, fifth ounce, 10th ounce. A lot of countries have issued 10th ounce coins, 1/10 of an ounce coin. And why? Because if you have to use those coins for barter, they're going to be very good to use. And that's why silver coinage, everybody in the world knows, is very good. And it's the cheapest way to buy silver. If you want to mix in some mint state, graded, numismatic coins, which could have a big upside, you can consider that. And I would split 50-50 between gold and silver. As far as the remainder of the money, the 70%, I would put it in 80% of it in the 4 blue chips that I'm recommending, and the 20% into 2 speculations. And anybody that wants this information, all they have to do is email me, and I'll send it to them, along with a copy of the forecaster. You go to Bob at intforecaster.com, Bob at intforecaster.com.
Okay, fine. And what about a better place to live? If you were, now you have a very special situation because, of course, you're not very popular with the powers that be. But, if the average individual, where should they live? Should they stay in America? Should they be looking to flee to some other place?
It's up to the individual. It's up to the age, children. There's all sorts of considerations. I guess we'll have to address it on the other side of this wonderful message.
All right, fine. Well, our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. It's for me and my family. We're sticking here. I'm a little old to leave, and here's where the battle is for the survival of Western civilization. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and our guest is Bob Chapman for the International Forecast. If you'd like to talk to him, our number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. What the average American really doesn't understand is that our leaders have been actually creating a tremendous trade deficit, which means the other countries accumulate a lot of dollars. What have they done? Why, of course, they've followed, I think it was Gerald Ford's advice, buy America. And they are buying American. And basically, I remember by talking the financial tsunami about 6 years ago, why 25% of our major corporations were owned by foreign corporations. It's only gotten bad. Certainly, they did a program last night, on the undercover boss, talking about Mack trucks. I mean, what could be more American than Mack trucks? Well, of course, the only trouble is it isn't an American corporation anymore. It's been bought up by Volvo, and they can move it overseas anytime. What's more American than that? Chrysler, only, of course, we just gave it to Fiat. They didn't have to put up any money. We just gave it to them because they had a Fiat as a member of the Trilateral Commission, member of the Brotherhood of Darkness, and China's coming in and buying up property, foreclosed homes, apartment houses, commercial building. Other countries are coming in here. Anheuser-Busch has been bought up by a Brazilian company. So many of our beers, so many of our corporations, so many of our businesses, those that have not left the country are now owned by foreign countries or corporations in foreign countries. And the profits from them will not be remaining here to enrich our people. It'll be going overseas. This is part of the planned program of the destruction of our economy. Well, before we go on, Bob, I want you to tell our listeners basically how they can get a copy of the International Forecaster and how they, of course, can certainly subscribe to it. But I will tell our listeners, you want to have this. You want to know what's going on. Because if you don't know what's going on, you don't make preparations, and it's a little late now. And yet things certainly have a long way to run as they suddenly destroy over this next 2 years the value of our currency. Do you know a better way to destroy a great nation than to destroy the currency, the foundation of a civilization, and impoverish the people of America? People say it couldn't happen. Ladies and gentlemen, it is happening. As Bob pointed out at the beginning of the program, after hours, why silver went up over $1.50 today. Over $1.50 an ounce today. So if you have been putting off doing something, why, well, you can still do it, but do not wait. It's got a long way to go as the value of the dollar continues being progressively destroyed. And the people who say, well, I want to keep my money, don't understand the history of what's gone on. You need to get the little pamphlet, Fiat Money, Inflation in France, and see what happened in France in 1789, because those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The pamphlet, it's a little book, Fiat Money, Inflation in France. It was written by Andrew Dickinson White. I'm sure Bob remembers that. But go ahead, Bob. Why don't you tell them about the forecaster, how they can subscribe? They should subscribe, and if they want to survive at all, or at least maintain some of their wealth. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'd like to bring to the attention of the listeners that a recent study of an execution in France found out by a medical doctor that after the execution by guillotine they use in France, that the head is alive for 30 seconds approximately after it's been severed from the body. So I just thought I'd leave you with those lugubrious words, so to speak. Anyway, the International Forecaster is about business, finance, economic, social, and political issues all over the world. It is published Wednesday and Saturday by email, runs around 40 pages each time. We have a hard copy that goes out twice a month for those who are not on the Internet. And we like to think that everything that you need to know every week is in that publication. You can get a free introductory copy by going to theinternationalforecaster.com. The International, FORECASTER.com. You can also go to www.intforecaster.com. That's intforecaster.com. And as I said earlier, if you would like a free copy of either, or if you would like to get the latest releases, and they're free, and we answer everybody, you can go to Bob, B-O-B, at intforecaster.com. That's Bob at intforecaster.com, or you can call toll free 800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188.
All right, fine. Well, it's certainly an excellent source of information, and you need that information in times like these. Well, certainly somebody called in and said, where in the world could you move where you'd really be safe? And certainly there are people who, when they're faced with an opportunity to stay and fight for their freedom, would just as soon flee. And yet, of course, I've always liked to say, you can die on your feet or you can die on your knees, but you're going to die anyway. And, of course, men who aren't willing to fight for their freedom are condemned to lose it, and certainly they deserve to lose it. Bob Chapman is in the fight, even though, he's, we'll not say where he's living, because, of course, it would be very dangerous for him to be here in the studio tonight. But anyway, Bob Chapman, where, if people are thinking of fleeing, could they flee to?
Well, I see people who are leaving Australia, and so they've told me it's not a very good spot to be anymore. And the rules are being ratcheted up, and they're making lots of the same mistakes that other countries have made. So I'll leave that out. Chile is a good country to go to. They got wonderful wine if you like wine, and it's very hospitable. A lot of Latin Americans move there who are not happy with the countries in which they live. Nearby is Uruguay, and Montevideo is a lovely city. I've lived there, and the beaches are fantastic along the River Plate, and it's only 20 minutes by plane to Buenos Aires, and but I wouldn't recommend living in Buenos Aires or in Argentina because the crime's endemic, just as it is in Brazil. The Paraguay is a farming community more than anything. You have a communist government in Uruguay, which is the last thing I would have ever imagined, but it's a very nice country. You have communist governments in Venezuela, Ecuador, and Bolivia. In fact, last week, the Bolivian President Morales was chased by the people in one of the big towns there, and they threw lit sticks of dynamite at him. So, obviously, there's a little trouble in Bolivia. The country of Colombia is fine. It's an American satrapy, if you may, and but it's a nice place to live. Panama, with all the rule changes and the attitude that's come of late, and they have the dollar as their currency, I pass. Costa Rica is okay, but it's very boring. I lived there for several years. And Mexico is excellent because it's like sliding from your hometown to another hometown, so to speak. Half the people in Mexico speak English, so it's not a problem. Europe is okay. France, Germany, Switzerland. But the problem is it's very expensive by American standards. Now, you might find that surprising. It's very expensive. I lived in Africa for a number of years, just like Stan did. I wouldn't send anybody there. That's a tough place to live. Any place. And you see what's going on in North Africa. We've got Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, and then you got Yemen, Bahrain, Jordan, Libya. Who needs it? Forget it. And there are places in Asia, which many people go to, Thailand and Malaysia and other places, Singapore. I can't comment on them because I've had plus and minus stories, so you'll have to find out for yourself. But some of the economies are doing very well. Canada, but the cost of living is a third higher than it is in the United States. The goods you buy at the store are a third higher. I mean, you compare that to the other neighbor, Mexico, and they're about 20% lower than the United States. So, you got to make your own choices. What you do is Google areas, talk to consulates, take trips, and then you'll find out.
All right, fine. Well, Sidney, I think the battle for the survival of Western civilization is here. I know when last time we talked to Lord Monckton, who's a member of the House of Lords, he carries a constitution with him, hoping that the Americans are going to save his country, Great Britain. because he says that America is the only country that can save the world. Everything is in place for the world government. He's attending the meeting in Khartoum, I guess it is, and basically said it was decided there that everything they would proceed with their move towards world government. They just wouldn't tell anybody. And of course, they'll simply bring it in by executive order, and with that, the loss of our Constitution, the loss of our sovereignty, the loss of the freedoms that we've enjoyed, and of course the imposition of a brutal tyranny in the hands of the people who are creating this revolution over in the Near East and the Middle East, the same people who financed the Russians and the Russian Revolution, the same people who financed Adolf Hitler, the same people who are financing Islamic terrorism today. And if you don't think this whole thing's as phony as a $3 bill, I was just reading where there's a gentleman, and basically he was the man who trained the London 7, the 7-7 terrorists. Supposedly they're the people who blew up the buses and subways over there in London, and I think they killed 20 or 30 people, and this is the man who actually trained the terrorists and gave them helped them get the explosives. And he was arrested and tried here in the United States and let out on time served. Now, after killing 20 people, he was fined $500 and let out on time served, about 4 years. Well, why you get that for a mild burglary? And some people are saying, why would you let a guy go who's responsible for the death of 20 people? Well, he's a nice guy, and he really helped us. And it's sort of like the Lockerbie bomber. He killed over 200 people, and, we let him out on compassionate release at 7 years because he was dying of cancer. And he suddenly made a miraculous recovery. Isn't that interesting? Or Ali Muhammad, who planned the first World Trade Center bombing, and Ali Muhammad, who planned the bombing of the Cole, and Ali Muhammad, who planned the bombing of the American embassies in Tanzania, and you go up on the internet, you can look it up. They've got two Wikipedia websites. Why? Two websites on the same person? Well, they're hoping it won't be the one that tells you that many people think of us all the time working for American intelligence. Let's go to Frank, who's calling us from San Jose. Our telephone number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. Frank, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
You have a question for our guest.
I wanted to ask you and Bob, if we do go into a total world government, which would be like a dictatorship, would it be through the United Nations, and who would be the people who would end up being in total charge? Would it be the Chinese, the Russians, Europeans? Who would be the final dictator?
Well, first of all, it would be a conglomeration of people who all have the same idea, world government. And they will come from a number of different countries. The leadership, generally speaking, will come from Europe, the United States, with input from China and perhaps other countries as well. There are a number of people who live throughout the world who are in league with these Illuminists, these people who belong to the Brotherhood of Darkness. So the answer to that is they're going to come from different places. You're going to see leagues and leagues of bureaucrats, all of whom are paid off and controlled to do the Sherpa work for them. And they'll use the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, if it exists at that time, the European Central Bank, and so on and so forth. And so that's what you can expect.
So end up like Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, where 5% of the population belonged to the Communist Party, and they ran the government, and everybody else was just a peon and got whatever little bit was allotted to them.
Right. Anything else, Frank? But what are you going to do to try to oppose them, to try to get this information out, to help us expose what's going on?
Well, I tell everybody that I know to listen into this program.
Okay, that's all we can do. And then, of course, pray for America. But remember, this is a spiritual battle. And without God's help, there is no possible way America will survive. But we have to understand the spiritual forces that are at work today. And because the only way America is going to be saved is this great revival. Thanks for calling. Let's go to Mark, who's calling from San Jose. Hi, Mark. Did you have a question or comment?
Well, I was wondering if I could lead us in a prayer for the salvation of President Obama, being this is President's Day.
Well, I don't go right ahead. We've got 30 seconds.
May his days be few, and may it never take his office, Lord, if that be thy will. But if it be thy will to save his soul, I pray that you would. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, fine. Well, certainly we should pray for President Obama, too. God could do amazing things, even with the greatest of sinners, as we saw with the conversion of Saul of Tarsus to Paul, the great disciple. God bless and thanks so much. Well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest has been Bob Chapman, the International Forecaster, and certainly I hope that you'll want to get information on what's going on. Certainly we have